The Sharps was already at his shoulder when Ranger Roman Halstead came around the wrecked mercantile shelves and found the boy in his sights. Not a boy, really. 17 summers, maybe. But Roman had learned long ago that a rifle does not stop to ask a man's age before it decides who lives. 6 Lipan riders, boxed against the ruin of a looted trading post outside Fort Belknap, hands loose on rope and lance, none of it drawn, cattle scattered behind them in the mesquite, stock that had gone missing off 3 ranches along the Brazos in the last month, and the settlers wanted somebody's blood for it more than they wanted the cattle back. Heat sat on the clearing like a held breath. Dust hung where hooves had stirred it, unwilling to settle, and the shell of the trading post ticked and creaked behind them. Burnt roof beams cooling, or maybe just the sound a place makes when it's been picked clean twice, once by whoever raided it, once by everybody who'd blamed the Lipan for it since. Fort Belknap itself was half a day's ride south, more graveyard than garrison now, patched together by frontier battalion rangers standing watch over a post the regular army had walked away from years back. Nobody out here answered to much of anybody. That was the trouble. Roman's men fanned wide on either side of him. 4 rifles besides his own. Behind him, young Ranger Ennis Colt breathed too fast, the way green men always did before their first shot. "Easy," Roman said. Not to the Lipan, to his own. The warrior nearest him did not move his hands, did not blink, just held Roman's eyes with a stillness no 17-year-old had any business owning. Something in the boy's face snagged, familiar in a way Roman could not yet name, and was gone before he could chase it down. Then the morning cleared the ridge behind the burned-out post, and the light came flat and gold across the clearing, and it caught on something small at the boy's throat. Brass, turning slow on a leather cord as he breathed. Roman's finger did not leave the trigger, but something behind his ribs did, dropped through him whole, the way a man falls through ice he'd have sworn 1 second before was solid ground. He knew that locket. He had watched Cora fasten that clasp 100 mornings at a wash basin in a wagon that no longer existed, on a road that no longer existed. 17 years and 1 massacre gone. She used to catch the chain between 2 fingers and let it swing while she thought, absent, the way other women twisted a ring. He had buried her with everything else the raiders left behind that day, the wagon axle, the scattered trunk, the single boot they never found a match for. He had never once let himself imagine the one thing they took clean off her body would come riding back at him wearing a warband's paint. Grief settles into a man like sediment. He stops feeling the weight of it until the ground gives, and he learns exactly how deep it runs. There are losses a man buries so far down he needs the whole world's help digging them back up. Have you ever carried one that long? "Ranger?" Colt's voice, thin at his back. "You want him first, or the one on the paint horse?" Roman did not answer, could not have if his life had swung on it. The rifle stayed level. His grip did not, going soft and uncertain on the stock, a boy's hold on a man's weapon. The locket turned once more in the light, caught, held. Roman lowered the sharps. He lowered it slow. The deliberate care of a man setting down something that might still be hot to the touch. And for 3 full seconds, nobody on either side of that clearing understood what they were looking at. Then the Lipan riders read it faster than his own men did. Read the opening for exactly what it was, and were gone into the brush before the dust behind them had a name. Nobody fired, nobody gave chase. It was over in less time than it takes to say the word cattle. The 5 men of Roman's patrol sat their horses a long while in the ruined dooryard of the trading post, and none of them said a word, and the silence had teeth in it. Colt broke it first, because Colt was still young enough to believe silence needed breaking. "You had him," he said, "dead in your sights. 6 of 'em standing there for the taking, and you just let 'em ride." Roman didn't look at him. He was studying the empty ground where the boy had stood, the drag marks the ponies left crossing the wash, like a man reading a page after somebody's already carried off the book. "There a reason, Ranger?" That was Deacon's, older, harder, a man who'd ridden under 3 captains and buried 2 of them. "'Cause the major's gonna want one. Colonists are gonna want one worse." Roman opened his mouth. Nothing came. He had an answer. He could feel it sitting whole in his chest, true and utterly impossible to hand across to another man on horseback in a burned-out trading post. A boy's throat, a dead wife's locket, 17 years of a grave he'd stopped visiting because visiting it had never once brought her back, and admitting that to another living soul would cost him something he did not have left to spend. He could not say any of it. Not here. Maybe not ever. "No," Roman said finally. "No reason I can give you." Deacons spat into the dust and said nothing more. But the look he traded with Colt said everything Roman had been too much of a coward, or too much of something else, to say for himself. That the ranger who'd never once in 9 years let an outlaw walk had stood there today, rifle raised on a boy who'd likely helped empty 3 men's herds, and let him go like it cost nothing at all. They mounted up. Nobody offered Roman the lead this time. He took it anyway, out of habit more than authority. And the patrol fell in behind him without a word. Halfway back, the heat broke into a wind that carried grit sideways across the trail, and Colt pulled his bandana up over his mouth and nose. A man closing a door on a conversation he'd already decided was finished. Deacons didn't bother. He just watched Roman's back the whole ride, steady as a man watching a fuse he couldn't see the end of. Roman felt every mile of it. He kept his eyes on the road and his hand loose on the reins, and let the silence do the talking he couldn't. Not yet. Not in front of these men. Maybe not in front of anyone alive. They rode back toward the post in a silence that would follow Roman all the way through the gate and past it, and into whatever came next. 5 men had watched him fail to explain himself, and somewhere behind them, riding hard for a camp Roman hadn't laid eyes on in 17 years, was a boy wearing the one piece of his dead wife the world had never given back, not knowing yet what he carried or who was about to come looking for it. The major's office smelled of tallow smoke and old paper. Roman had stood in it long enough to memorize both. 6 of them, the major said, not looking up from the letter on his desk. "You had 6 confirmed thieves boxed against a burned building, Ranger, and you rode home with nothing but sunburn to show for it." "They weren't running cattle when we found them," Roman said. "The herd was scattered behind the post. Could have come from anywhere. Could have." The major set the letter down and finally looked at him. The kind of look a man gives a horse he's deciding whether to shoot or sell. "Colton Ranch lost 40 head last month. The Ashbury place lost 60 the month before. Every rancher between here and the Salt Fork is riding to Austin. asking why the battalion can't stop a handful of Lipan boys emptying their pens. I am fresh out of answers that don't involve your name in them. Roman said nothing. There was nothing in the silence that would help him. He'd learned that much, if little else, in 9 years of wearing the badge. Deacons tells me you had a clean shot. Deacons wasn't wrong. Then I'd very much like to know why my most reliable ranger let 6 horse thieves ride off a killing field like Church was letting out. The truth sat behind Roman's teeth, whole and unspeakable. A boy's throat. A locket turning slow in the morning light. 17 years of a grave gone quiet with disuse. None of it would survive being said out loud in this room. He'd tried twice on the ride back. Both times, the words died before they cleared his mouth. There wasn't a reason I could give the men, Roman said. There still isn't one I can give you. The major studied him a long moment, long enough that the clock on the wall found its voice again, ticking into a silence with nowhere left to hide. Then he leaned back in his chair. Something in his face gave up trying to solve Roman Halstead and settled for using him instead. Fine, he said. You want to carry that weight, carry it somewhere useful. Colonists want their cattle back or blood for it. Doesn't much matter to them which. You go talk to whoever's running that band before I've got no choice but to send the battalion in force. And force doesn't ask polite questions about who took what. Give me the next contact, Roman said. Alone. The major's eyebrows went up half an inch, the most surprise the man ever showed anybody. Alone. I've got some of the tongue, had contacts out past the Brazos before the war, running dispatch. I go in with 4 rifles at my back. It reads as a raid before I open my mouth. I go in alone. It reads as a man who wants to talk. And if it reads as an easy scalp instead, then you'll have your reason for the next patrol, Roman said, and it won't be mine you're asking about. The major weighed it slowly. He was already drafting the report he might need to defend in Austin, gauging which direction the blame would fall if this went wrong. Finally, he nodded once, went back to his letter, already finished with the conversation before Roman had crossed the room. Before the next moon, he said to the paper, not to Roman. I want this settled clean, or I want it settled loud. Your choice, which? Roman rode out 2 mornings later, a pack horse of trade goods behind him. Flour, tobacco twist. A bolt of red cloth deacons had scared up from the sutler's shelf, no questions asked. Nothing on his belt that could be mistaken for a threat. He left the sharps behind. A man asking forgiveness does not walk in carrying the thing he needs forgiven. The Lipan camp sat where the salt fork bent hard around a stand of cottonwood, lodges strung along the water in a loose arc. Read right, it was a shape built for watching every approach at once. Smoke stood thin and straight above the fires. Dogs came first, then children, then men who did not reach for anything, but did not step back either. He raised the red cloth over his head before he raised his voice. Peace, talk, cattle, wrong. The handful of Lipan words he still trusted himself with, spoken careful and flat, like a man reciting something he'd once known better. It brought out a woman instead of a warrior. She came through the lodges unhurried, a blanket over one shoulder despite the heat. She stopped a spear's length off, still as someone used to being obeyed without ever raising her voice for it. Gray threaded her braid at the temple, Her eyes went over Roman once, head to boot. A trader's assessment, pricing a hide before she named a number. "You're the ranger who let the boys ride," she said, in English worn smooth by long use. "Word travels faster than horses out here." "I'm the ranger who wants his cattle back without anybody's blood on it," Roman said. "Yours or mine." "That's a strange want for a badge." "Strange year," Roman said. Something almost like a smile moved through her face and was gone before it settled anywhere. She studied the cloth, the flour sacks, the tobacco. Named a settlement for the herd. Fair enough that Roman didn't haggle it. 3 days to gather what strays could be found and drive them back to the Colton Range. No accusation spoken either direction. The matter closed clean, the kind sensible people close when neither side can afford to keep it open. The trade was agreed, the visit by rights finished. It was on her turn back toward the fire that her eyes came back to him a second time. Not a glance, a hold. Her gaze caught on his face and held, a beat too long for courtesy, tracing the line of his jaw, the set of his brow. Something in it snagged at a memory she couldn't place. The same thing had snagged in the boy's face 2 days before, at the trading post. Familiar, gone before either of them could chase it down. Roman felt it land somewhere under his collar. He couldn't have said why a stranger's stare should weigh anything at all. Then she looked away. Too fast, faster than manners alone would explain. Not in a woman who hadn't blinked once at an armed man walking into her camp. 3 days, she said again, already turning for the lodges, her voice even, her back very straight. "Bring nothing else with you next time, Ranger. You've already brought enough." She did not give him her name. Roman didn't ask for it. There hadn't been room, in the moment, to think of it. He rode back toward the post, the trade concluded, the cattle as good as settled. He told himself the whole way that the look on her face was nothing more than an old woman's caution around a stranger in a blue coat. He almost believed it. He might have, if she hadn't looked away so fast. 3 days became 6. Roman told himself he was there for the cattle, counting head against Deacon's tally, making sure the trade held clean on both ends of the ledger. That excuse worked twice. By the 3rd visit, even Roman had stopped offering it to himself. He rode out each time with something small enough to explain. A spool of wire, a sack of coffee beans, an axe head that needed a haft. Trade goods thin enough to look practical, thick enough to give him a reason to be standing in that camp again. Naleen took each one with the same flat courtesy she'd shown the flour. She never once asked why a man who'd already settled his cattle kept finding reasons to ride 2 hours each way to settle it further. The camp along the Salt Fork stopped looking like one shape and became many. Smoke that had seemed featureless the first morning sorted itself into cook fires, a tanning rack, a boy patient with a green hide and a dull blade. Dogs learned the sound of Roman's horse and quit barking at it. Children stopped scattering when he rode in. They started instead arguing over which of them got to hold the reins. The boy from the trading post kept his distance the first 2 visits. On the 3rd, he was simply there, crouched at the fire's edge, working a length of raw hide through his fingers, watching Roman with the patience of somebody keeping count of a debt. Naleen called him Tazen, said it plain, worn smooth from use, without ceremony. She did not say where the name had come from. When Roman asked, careful sideways, more curious than a stranger had any right to be, she found something urgent to do with her hands, and let the question die where it stood. "He's a good tracker," was all she offered. "Best in the band some days. Reads a trail like scripture." Where'd he learn that? Same place everybody learns anything. She didn't look up from the hide she was scraping. Somebody teaches you, or the world does, harder. It wasn't an answer. Roman had cross-examined enough liars, enough honest men scared of a truth, to know the difference. This was neither. This was a door somebody had decided a long time ago never to open again for anybody's convenience. He let it go. He was good by now at letting things go that refused to stay let go. It was the fourth visit that put him close enough to see the boy's wrist. Tazen reached across the fire for a coal to light his pipe, sleeve riding up past the bone. And there it was, a scar banding the wrist like a bracelet, old rope burn, gone silver white with years, the kind a man only carried if something had once been tied there, tight, and left long enough to outlast the rope itself. Roman had seen that scar before, not on this wrist, on a smaller one screaming in a wagon bed 17 years dead. He didn't move, didn't let his face do anything at all, which was, itself, its own kind of confession, the stillness of a man working hard to look like he wasn't working at anything. Tazen caught it anyway, lit the pipe, said nothing. That evening, walking Roman back to his horse, one of the younger men planted himself in the path, didn't move. Nakai, broad through the shoulders, young enough still to trust his own anger. "You come around too often for a man just counting cattle. Man's allowed to make sure a trade holds. Trade held 3 visits ago." Nakai's eyes went flat and hard, a man deciding whether a fight was worth starting. "What is it you're really counting, Ranger?" Roman's jaw stayed shut around whatever he wasn't ready to say. Not to this boy, not to anybody living. He held the stare instead, level and unhurried. Nakai broke it first, stepped aside with the stiff pride of a man choosing to let something go rather than admit he'd lost it. It didn't feel like a victory. It felt like borrowed time. Roman knew the difference too well to mistake one for the other. He almost didn't ride back after that. Told himself, all the way to the post, that 6 visits was already more than any cattle count required, more than a badge could explain to a major already short on patience. Then, on the 7th visit, he heard the tune. It came off an old woman's lips near the tanning rack, half hummed, half forgotten. The kind of thing a person carries so far back in the throat they stop noticing they're doing it. 4 notes rising, a 5th that dropped away soft at the end. Roman's hands went still on the reins before his mind caught up to why. Cora used to hum that same fall of notes over a wash basin, unconscious as breathing, cut off mid-phrase 100 times by some chore or some laugh, never once finished. He had not heard it in 17 years. He had not known until that instant he'd been listening for it the whole time. He found Tazen at the fire's edge, working the same length of rawhide he was always working. For once, Roman did not look away when the boy glanced up and caught him at it. The collar of Tazen's shirt had slipped loose in the heat. A leather cord showed at his throat, and something small and dark swung from it, tucked back out of sight, before Roman's eyes finished confirming what they'd already told him. Brass. He'd have known that catch of color across a mile of open ground, and dark besides. "You're doing it again," Tazen said. Not sharp, just flat and tired of staying flat about it. Watching me like a man looking for something he lost and can't say the name of out loud. Roman opened his mouth. The truth was too heavy to lift in front of the boy, and no lie he could reach for was light enough to carry instead. Not with those eyes waiting on him now, very still, very old for 17 summers, in no hurry at all to look away first. "Why," Tazen said, "do you look at me like that? Ranger?" Tazen's question hung in the smoke between them, and Roman had no answer built to survive being spoken aloud. He might have stood there until the fire burned to coals if Naleen hadn't crossed the clearing first, a hand light on the boy's shoulder, the kind of touch that ended conversations without a word of instruction attached to it. "Go check the pony line," she said. Nakai left the far stake loose again. Tazen went, not because he believed her, Roman could see that in the set of his jaw, but because 17 years of her word had earned exactly that kind of obedience, the sort that argues with its feet already moving. Naleen watched him out of earshot before she turned to Roman. Something in her face had changed since the wire and the coffee beans. Older all at once. A woman setting down a weight she'd carried so long the carrying had become the shape of her back. "Walk with me," she said. "Not far. Far enough." She led him past the last lodge, along the cottonwood line where the salt fork slowed and pooled dark under the roots. Evening had started stripping the heat off the day, quick about it, almost rude. A debt called in all at once. A dog barked twice behind them and gave it up. Naleen stopped where the bank widened into a flat shelf of gravel and stood a long moment looking at the water instead of at him. 17 years ago, she said, my band came up on a wagon road 2 days after something had already finished happening to it. Roman's chest went tight and still. Ice holding a man's weight right up until it doesn't. Raiders, she said, not ours, not soldiers either, men who answered to nobody, the kind that leave a road worse than they've found it and ride on before anyone can ask their names. Wagons burned, horses gone, people gone, nobody left standing to bury them proper. "I know that road," Roman said. His voice came out smaller than he meant it to. He had ridden it himself, 3 days behind, following wagon wheel ruts already going soft under new rain. He remembered the smell before the sight, char and something worse underneath it, hanging low where the wind couldn't reach to carry it off. He had searched for a small body for 3 months after that. Underbrush, along creek bottoms, in every gully a current might have carried something too light to fight it. He never found one. He told himself, eventually, that a river does not always give back what it takes. He had never said that sentence to another soul until this exact evening, standing on a gravel bank 2 hours from home. "I know you do." She said it without cruelty. A fact laid down, not a blade. We weren't looking for anything but water that day. Found the woman first, already past helping. Her hand closed slow around the edge of her blanket. Found the baby under her. Still breathing, still fighting, the only way a baby knows how to fight anything. The water kept moving. Roman did not. I had buried my own daughter 6 days before, Naleen said. Fever took her in a night. My milk hadn't stopped. My arms hadn't learned what to do with themselves. Her eyes came up to his, steady, carrying no apology for what she was about to say. So I picked him up, and I did not put him down again. Roman's hand found the pommel of an absent saddle, gripped nothing, let go. There was a locket near her hand, Naleen said. Brass, on a broken chain. I don't know if she pulled it loose reaching for him, or if the raiders tore it and dropped it, not worth the trouble of keeping. I tied it to his wrist with a strip of her own dress. A child that small needed to carry something of hers away from that road, even if he never knew what it was. Why the wrist? It was the only question small enough to survive his mouth. Because a neck can be taken off a dying child by anyone who wants brass, Naleen said. A wrist wrapped in cloth, tied through a baby fussing half the night. Nobody unwraps that out of simple wanting. I moved it to his throat myself, years later, once he was old enough that losing it would have cost somebody a fight. Roman looked past her, toward the fires, toward a boy checking a stake that had never once come loose. I never told him, Naleen said, not because I meant to keep a lie running the rest of my life, because every year that passed, the truth cost more to hand over than the year before it. A child believes he is loved without condition. Tell him where he came from, and some nights he wonders if the love came with one attached. She looked back at the water. I told myself I'd say it when he was old enough. Then old enough kept moving further off, the way a horizon does. Does anyone else know? The ones who were there that day, most gone now to age or worse. A long breath. I have carried this alone longer than I raised him with company. That is its own grief, Ranger, if you have never had to hold one down by yourself for 17 years. Roman had. He said nothing. There was nothing in the saying that would have added weight to what already sat between them. Mother is not the one who bleeds to bring a child into the world, Naleen said, quiet more to the river than to him. It is the one who stays after everything else has already been lost. The words settled into Roman like something dropped down a well, the sound going on long after the thing itself had hit bottom. I have to tell him, Roman said. Naleen, I have to tell him who he is. You have wanted to say that since the trading post, she said. I watched it sit behind your teeth the whole ride out here, same as it sat behind mine, 17 years. Then let me. Naleen turned from the water and studied him a long moment, the same slow appraisal she'd given him days before at the edge of the lodges, a trader pricing a hide. Heavier now. Final. Before you say one word to that boy, she said, I need to know something first. Not whether you love him. I already see that plain enough on your face. Her voice dropped, low and even, carrying the whole weight of 17 years behind it. I need to know if you are ready to lose a son a second time, a different way than the first. Naleen did not wait for an answer. Whatever she read in his silence answered her instead. She turned back toward the fires, blanket gathered close, and left the question standing on the gravel bank where she'd set it down, too heavy to carry back to camp with her. Roman stood at the water a long while after she'd gone. The salt fork ran low and easy that evening, unbothered by anything he now knew about it. He thought about answering her honestly. He thought about not answering at all. In the end, he did neither. He rode back to the post in the dark, the question riding with him, uninvited, a second horse, a lead rope. 3 days it followed him like that. 3 days of ordinary work, wearing thin the edges of an extraordinary secret. Supply counts, a fence line down past the north pasture, a colonist's letter demanding to know why the raiders still hadn't hanged for the missing cattle. Roman answered what he could and let the rest sit. Overhead, clouds built themselves out of nothing every afternoon, dark and swollen, then broke apart before dusk without spending a drop. The land had wanted rain for weeks. It had stopped expecting the rain to come. It came on the fourth night, all at once, no warning, laid down first. Rain hit the roof of the post before Roman heard the first thunder, hard, flat, more weight than water. He was checking the picket line when Sergeant Boyle found him, oilskin already dark to the shoulders. "Salt Fork's coming up fast, sir. Coral Canyon's dumping into it upstream. Storm sat over the headwaters most of the afternoon." Roman was already moving. "The band camp's low on the south bank." "Yes, sir." He took 2 horses, left the rest of the order unspoken. There wasn't a man at that post who'd have understood why a ranger rode toward a Lipan camp in a flood instead of away from one. He did not have 3 days left to explain it. The water reached the first lodges before Roman reached the camp. He heard it before he saw it. A sound with no single source, the whole night rearranging itself at once. Torches moved along the bank in a pattern he didn't recognize at first. Then he did. Not panic. Order. People who had done this before, or their grandparents had, and had never once stopped teaching it forward. Tazen was in the middle of it, waist deep already, hauling a dun mare by the halter toward the rise, while a boy no older than 10 clung to her mane. He saw Roman and didn't waste breath on surprise. "Cattle first up riverside," he shouted over the water. "They'll bolt downstream into the current if nobody turns them." Roman went where he was pointed. It was not a request. Some old instinct in him, the one that had worn a badge for 20 years and given orders more often than he'd taken them, noted that and let it go without argument. No room in the next hour for a man's pride about who gave the directions. He turned cattle in the dark by feel more than sight, a rope in one hand and the current pulling at his boots with a strength that had no patience for a man's opinion of it. Twice he lost his footing. Twice. A hand he never saw clearly hauled him back before the river could finish the thought. It was past midnight when the water took the youngest of Nakai's children, pulled clean off the bank where she'd been set down for one unwatched second. The current folded over her like it had been waiting all night for exactly that mistake. Tazen went in without a word, without a rope, without anything but the fact that he was closest. Roman was 3 strides behind him, close enough to see the current take them both sideways, fast, faster than a man could think his way out of. He caught Tazen's shoulder first, pure luck maybe, he never sorted out which, and used it to haul them both toward a fallen cottonwood wedged against the bank. Its roots still gripping ground the flood hadn't taken yet. Tazen had the girl by then, one arm locked around her so hard she'd carry the bruise a week. She would never once complain about it. They came up onto the bank in a tangle of limbs and river water, all 3 coughing, none of them speaking. There wasn't a sentence built that would have carried more than their hands were already saying. The girl's mother took her without a word either. Some exchanges don't need one, not that one. By the time the water crested and started giving ground back, dawn had gone gray at the edges of the sky, and there wasn't a dry thread left on either man. They sat on the same fallen cottonwood that had caught them, not because either had chosen to sit together, because it was the only dry wood left standing close enough to matter. Tazen worked at a knot in the rope still looped around his wrist, said nothing about the last 2 hours. Roman let the silence stand. He did not fill it with something smaller than what had happened. "You're a hand short a season," Tazen said eventually, nodding toward the herd bunched loose on the rise. "2, maybe." Counted the same. Roman flexed fingers that had stopped answering him properly somewhere around the 4th cow. "You always run into water like that?" "Only when somebody's still in it." It wasn't much of an answer. It was, Roman understood, the only kind Tazen had ever needed to give anybody. For the length of that gray morning, it was enough for both of them. No names traded, no history spoken, just 2 men who had hauled the same rope through the same current, both still holding it on the other side. Roman rode back to the post an hour after sunup, soaked through, hands raw. Something in his chest sat looser than it had in 17 years. He told himself it was only exhaustion. He knew, riding, that it wasn't only that. The order was waiting on his desk when he got there, folded once. The major's seal, pressed into wax gone hard hours before. Long enough that whoever left it hadn't wanted to be in the room when Roman read it. He unfolded it standing, the way a man opens something he already suspects will change the shape of the room around him. Patrol to proceed against the band on the Salt Fork. Full strength. Before the next full moon, Roman read it twice. Water was still running out of his boots onto the floorboards, and somewhere under that sound, he heard the gravel bank again. Naleen's voice asking him a question he still hadn't answered. He understood now, standing there dripping in the lamplight, exactly what she had meant by it. The major did not stand when Roman came through the door. That told him most of what he needed before either man spoke. "You've read it," the major said, not a question. "I read it." Roman set his hat on the corner of the desk, the only calm thing left in him, small enough to set down. "I'm here to ask you to burn it." Burn it. The major didn't look up. He kept closing the ledger unhurried, a man who had already decided how this would go. Tallow smoke sat thick in the room, same as always. 9 years, and now he hated the smell of it. 6 weeks of stolen cattle, 2 ranch families riding Austin twice a week, and you want me to burn the one order that finally answers them. There's no thieves left to punish. The herd's back on the Colton Range. I settled it myself. You settled cattle. The major set the ledger flat and folded his hands over it. Austin doesn't want cattle settled. Austin wants the battalion to answer force with force once, loud enough that nobody up that river gets ideas about doing it twice. Nobody up that river did it the first time. Roman kept his voice level. It cost him more than the words let on. You send a full patrol against that band, you're not answering theft. You're starting something new. Then bring me a name to hang, not an empty saddle and a story you still can't tell me. The major looked up at last, not unkind, worse than unkind, patient, a man weighing a horse he'd already decided to sell. I gave you 6 days, Ranger, and a pack horse of goodwill. You gave me nothing back but more questions. Roman had nothing ready that would hold up in that room. He'd rehearsed something on the ride in, about mercy, about the herd returned whole, about a band that had settled every debt and asked no favor in trade. None of it reached his mouth. Out loud, it would sound like a man arguing for people he had reason of his own to protect, and the major wasn't a fool. He hadn't gotten this post by being one. Before the next moon. The major said it again, softer now. Somehow, that was worse. "The order stands, Halstead. Ride with it, or hand me your badge and watch from town." He let that sit a beat. Two choices left on this desk. Roman picked his hat back up. His hand was steadier doing that than it had been setting it down. He rode for the Salt Fork inside the hour. Heat lay flat across the trail, dry, offering nothing. He did not know the whole way there what he meant to do once he arrived. The camp already had the news ahead of him. Nakai met him at the tree line, rifle not raised, not slung either, ready, and no shame in it. Word came an hour past, Nakai said. Scouts saw riders drilling at the post, full strength. Somebody's counting horses that don't count cattle. I tried to talk him down, Roman said. I failed. Nakai's jaw worked once. No more words. He stepped aside and let him through. Not trust. Just a man too tired to fight two wars in one evening. Naleen was at her lodge, working a fresh hide across its frame. One look. That was all it took. The ride down had cost him plenty, and it showed. He wouldn't move, Roman said. I didn't think he would. The scraper kept moving in her hands, steady, unhurried, and it did not stop while she spoke. I've been asking myself something since the water went down. You asked to tell him yourself. I said, not yet. Naleen, I'm done saying not yet. She set the scraper down and folded the hide closed over its frame, gentle, final. Not for your order's sake. A boy who might ride toward a rifle line before the next moon deserves to know whose blood he's riding toward, whichever side he chooses after. She called for him herself. Tazen came up from the pony line at a walk, a length of raw hide looped through his fingers out of habit. He stopped. Both their faces were turned toward him at once, understood, before either spoke, that this was not an ordinary evening. Naleen told it plain. The wagon rode, the woman past helping, the baby still fighting, the only thing a baby knows how to do. The locket, tied first to a wrist too small to lose it, moved later to a throat old enough to keep it. She spent no more words on it than the truth required. By the time she finished, the fire between them had burned down to something that gave more shadow than light. Tazen didn't speak for a long while, not a word. His hand found the cord at his own throat, and he didn't seem to notice it had moved there. You knew, he said finally to Naleen. Not an accusation, just a fact, finding its shape on the way out of a mouth that had never carried it before. I knew. Silence for a beat. Then he turned to Roman. First time all evening, he let his eyes rest there and stay. Not the trading post's stillness this time, but something rawer under it, working hard to hold its own shape. And the man who ordered riders against this camp, Tazen said, is the same man you answer to. Yes. Then I don't know yet, Tazen said, if I've got a father or an enemy riding toward that crossing before the moon turns. Nobody answered. Nobody in that firelight had an answer built to survive it. Tazen stood and walked for the pony line. No more words. Naleen called once after him, not his name, just a sound meant to slow him. And it didn't slow him at all. He caught the dun mare by the halter, swung up bareback in the near dark, and put her toward the trail west along the Salt Fork, the one that met the old Butterfield crossing before the land opened out toward the post. Roman started after him on foot, 3 strides, then he stopped himself. Some things a man cannot follow into. He watched horse and rider fold into the dark until there was nothing left to watch. Overhead, the day's last heat finally broke. Too late to help anybody, same as always. Somewhere past the tree line, a nightjar started up, indifferent to the ford, the moon, or which word a boy would find waiting for him when he reached it. Roman stood in the dying light beside a woman who had just given away the only secret she'd ever kept. Neither of them had any say left in what came next. That belonged now to a boy riding alone toward a crossing in the dark, not yet knowing if the man waiting there was blood or badge or both at once. No way left to find out but the riding itself. Roman did not ride back to the post that night. He rode for the crossing instead, alone, the badge still pinned where it had sat for 9 years, heavier now than it had ever weighed before. The old Butterfield Ford sat where the Salt Fork shallowed over gravel, wide enough once for a stage line that hadn't run in a decade. Dawn came up gray behind him as he reached it. No fire, no cover. No, just open water and open ground. The one place a man could see everyone coming from every direction at once. Tazen was already there. He sat the dun mare in the middle of the ford, unmoving, water breaking pale around her legs. He hadn't slept either. Roman could read that much in the set of his shoulders, the same stillness he'd worn at the trading post, 17 years folded down into one night. Neither man spoke first. There wasn't a sentence built for it yet. "Patrol's coming," Tazen said finally. "I know." "Father or enemy?" Tazen said. "You never answered." Roman rode into the water beside him, let it answer instead. He turned his horse to face the trail south, the one the patrol would come down, stopped there, in the middle of the crossing, where nobody riding through could avoid seeing him first. They heard the column before they saw it. Leather and iron, the particular weight of men who did not want to be doing what they were about to do. The major rode at the front, Deacons beside him, Colt a length back, young enough still that his face hadn't learned to hide anything. The column stopped a dozen yards short of the water. "Ranger," the major's voice carried flat across the gravel. "You're in the road." "I am." "Move, or I'll have you moved." Roman swung down off his horse, slow, the deliberate care of a man setting down something that might still be hot to the touch. He unpinned the badge from his coat, turned it once in the gray light, the same brass catch he'd been chasing 17 years without knowing it. Then he crossed the last few feet of dry ground and set it on a flat stone at the major's stirrup. "There's your reason," Roman said. "Every reason you asked me for, and every one I couldn't give you. The boy behind me is my son. His mother wore a locket the day raiders killed her out past Coro Canyon, 17 years gone. This band found him alive under her body, raised him. When I couldn't find so much as a grave to put flowers on, that locket's been at his throat since before he could walk. I saw it catch the light at that trading post. Near put a bullet through my own blood before I knew what I was looking at." Nobody on that column moved. "I'm not asking you to believe me," Roman said. "I'm telling you, there's no thieves to punish, no band to answer for. There's a family the river split apart once, and I will not be the man who lets it finish the job." He stepped back into the water beside his son. Tazen reached up, pulled the cord loose from under his collar, let the locket swing free over the war paint he'd ridden out in, brass, catching what little dawn made it through the clouds. He said nothing. He didn't need to. A boy wearing a dead woman's locket over a war band's paint said more than any speech Roman could have built in a lifetime of trying. The major looked at the badge on the stone a long moment, then at the two of them standing the ford together. One blue coat, one war paint. Close enough now that a man would have to be blind or lying to call them two different kinds of people. Behind him, Colt shifted in his saddle, said nothing. But something crossed his face that hadn't been there at the trading post. The particular quiet of a man revising in real time everything he'd been so sure of 9 days before. "Austin wants a name," the major said at last, quiet now, more to himself than to Roman. They never said whose. He sat his horse a while longer, then he turned it, slow. The whole column turned with him. Not an order, a decision every man behind him had already half made on his own. Nobody fired, nobody spoke it aloud as a retreat. They simply rode back the way they'd come. The water closed soft behind their tracks, quiet, as if it had never held them at all. Roman bent down and picked the badge back up off the stone, did not pin it on, put it in his coat instead, where a thing goes when a man means to keep it without needing it seen. He went back to the camp 3 days later, not to fetch anyone, only to sit at Naleen's fire and say in front of the whole band what he'd never once said out loud in 17 years of not saying it, that she was the boy's mother in every way a grave or a river could never undo, that he had not come to change that, only to be let near it. Naleen looked him over a long moment, unhurried, the same weighing look she'd worn at the flour sacks the first morning. Then she moved over on the log by the fire, made room. It was answer enough. They built the fire that night on flat gravel, exactly halfway between the post and the camp. Not Roman's ground, not Naleen's either. A line neither side had ever agreed to, and both of them somehow already knew. Tazen sat across from his father, the locket loose against his collarbone, no longer hidden, no longer needing to be. Roman watched the firelight catch it and let it go again and again, and did not reach for it once. Some things stop being yours to hold the moment you learn who was holding them all along. What he kept instead was smaller, only the memory of a chain between two fingers, 17 years old and finally set down. Mother is not the one who bleeds to bring a child into the world, Naleen had told him once. On a darker evening than this one, it is the one who stays after everything else has already been lost. Roman understood now that a father could be built the same, not by blood alone, by the choosing to stay close without ever once reaching to take. He had not recovered a son that spring. He had only recognized a man who'd already grown up fine without him, and found somehow that being welcomed at his fire was worth more than any claim a badge could ever have written. Would you have had the courage to let go of the right to call someone yours if staying close was the only way left to keep them?